So, in keeping with what we're saying, that as horrific as it is today, there is some dawn breaking. Spain is set to recognize Palestinian statehood by July. Spanish Foreign Minister Jose Manuel Alvarez confirmed on Wednesday that Madrid will recognize the state of Palestine before July. Quote, "We need a real Palestinian state," Alvarez said at a meeting with journalists in Brussels. "The Palestinian people must not be condemned to forever be refugees." Spain's parliament passed a non-binding resolution in favor of recognizing Palestinian statehood in 2014, but both center-right, then Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy, and his successor, Socialist Party leader Pedro Sanchez, maintained that official recognition should only happen in concert with the rest of the European Union. Alvarez said the change in Spain's position was directly linked to the high number of civilian casualties since Hamas's October 7th attack and the launch of Israel's military operations in Gaza, as well as to the lack of progress in securing peace by other methods. He added that recognizing Palestinian statehood was key to ending the conflict in the region. Now, not to put a damper on it, Israel don't give a fuck. But it does open the door to trade sanctions and diplomatic withdrawal. We feel the same solidarity for the 32,000 Palestinians who have been killed as we do for the 1,200 Israelis, he said. This recognition takes Israel into the equation. The recognition of the Palestinian state is the best guarantee of security for Israel. During an informal meeting on Monday with journalists accompanying him on a tour of the Middle East, Sanchez suggested Spain could recognize Palestine before the summer. The Spanish PM has been one of the most powerful critics within the EU of Israel's military operations in Gaza, and on Tuesday demanded explanations from Israeli authorities following the deaths of 7 people working for Spanish celebrity chef Jose Andres' World Central Kitchen in an airstrike in the Palestinian enclave. In a joint statement released after last month's European Council summit in Brussels, the heads of government of Spain, Ireland, Malta, and Slovenia announced Malta representing announced their readiness to extend recognition, quote, "for the sake of peace and security in the region when the time is right." 9 of the EU's 27 members currently recognize the right of Palestinians to a state, but the majority did so prior to joining the bloc and within a 1988 effort among then communist and non-aligned countries. Only Sweden, which extended recognition in 2014, has done so as an EU member. So the tide is turning. Palestine is also making a push currently in the UN to have the UN. Right now, it's recognized as an observing member to be elevated to full membership. Now, of course, that has to clear the Security Council. And you can imagine how that's going to go with us, although it's going to be another embarrassment like the ceasefire. You're going to have every other country vote for it but the United States. Although when you look at the atmosphere, who knows? Who knows? But as long as Joe Biden is president, I would not put my money on the United States not blocking that move. But I believe it would come up for a vote. I think they said April 18th.
Wow. Yeah. So that is something to keep an eye on because they have also sent a letter to the UN requesting membership and recognition, obviously. Pardon me. A representative from Malaysia floated that the UN should abolish the veto in order to get a ceasefire resolution passed. This was back when the United States was vetoing all of these.
Right.
But if they make a move like that, they may be able to work around people like our representatives who would potentially put the kibosh on such a thing. But yeah, I mean, this will accelerate anti-Israel sentiment and accelerate some momentum toward recognition of a Palestinian state because look, while we are more in the one-state solution camp, you also do have to recognize there are benefits to statehood of a kind. It's not a solution for the region, but that gives you a lot more bargaining power when you are recognized in that way.
Well, you know what you're really seeing now in the narrative, and this is what's really going to change the equation for Israel. The anti-Israel is anti-Semitism narrative has collapsed. It's completely collapsed. It's an absurd thing to even assert now. Whereas at the beginning, they were able to, Dana Bash was able to frame her entire special about this subject as the rise of a new anti-Semitism. Nobody can say this shit anymore. Nobody can say it anymore. And once the EU countries are free of that specter of, the Nazis, once they're really free of that and able to treat Israel the way it deserves to be treated, that's going to be the end of trade relations with Israel. Like, once that dam really breaks and that momentum gets going and one country after another sanctions Israel, how do you become the country that doesn't sanction Israel? How do you justify that after the horrors that, again, we have not even seen the beginnings of the worst of it, I'm afraid to say. That's going to be it. How are they going to have a functioning economy with the entire world refusing to trade with them? What, with the exception of us? I mean, are we going to be the last ones?
Yeah, I mean, look, this goes without saying. It's Israel's own fault. It's also our own fault. It's our own fault. We could have reined them in if we wanted to from the very start. And any political leader with any prudential judgment could have seen that this was going to happen. And so they could have said, listen, for your own good as a state, we have to implement a ceasefire now, and we have to figure out a response to October 7th that does not kill innocent people. Because we know from recent history, we cannot trust you guys not to go in and flatten the place. And so for Israel's own good, we should have called for an immediate ceasefire. You have access to our CIA. You have access to anything you want from us to go in and do targeted strikes against the people who harmed you. That is what should have happened for Israel's own good. Instead, we sat back. We let them run this. We're still letting them run this in this way. And so this is obviously Israel's fault, number one. But a very close second, in fact, maybe not a close second, maybe tied for number one, is us, because we had the power. And with any foresight at all, you could have seen this coming. At all. And I think they did see it coming. And I think they figured that there's just enough Zionist sentiment in this country that they could ride it out. I mean, how else do you explain? How do fucking 500,000 people flood the fucking square? If you had an Israel march now, you think they'd get nearly that many people showing up? I don't think so. Not in a million years.
I don't think so.
Not in a million years.
Not after this, honestly.
No, exactly.
Not after this.
Please clap.